When we think of movements, a lot of times we just think of how it looks from the outside. You see well-dressed people holding signs. The signs have messages. You're looking at them, but you're not one of them. Or you look at an iconic image like that. This is one of the most iconic American images. I believe this is Mexico City, 1968. There's a much longer, fascinating story about these men and their friendship, but we'll keep it moving. There's a lot of speakers today. Once again, you're looking from the outside. Yes, you see struggle. Yes, you see risk. Yes, you see potential sacrifice, but you don't see it from their side. By the way, if you ever wondered why one of them has on a glove on the right hand and the other one has on a glove on the left hand, it's because somebody forgot a pair of gloves, so they had to share the one that they had, and that is the truth. This is the image of Dr. King. And please understand, we are not comparing ourselves to any of these people. These are legends. These are role models. They are not us. But this is the image that a lot of us have of Dr. King. Triumphant, rhetorically fascinating, magnificent, but that is not how his struggle was. This is a photograph of Dr. King from the other side. We're not looking at the podium, we're behind the podium now. And if you saw the original of this photograph, what you would see is he's got a typewritten text with all kinds of ballpoint scratches on it. He's moved things with a pen, because that's what they did back then, from here to there. That cup of water is there because his throat's probably killing him because he only spoke 4 times a day. It's a little paper cup, it's crumpled. And as you look out, if you're able to look closely, you'll see some people are really interested. Some people are not so interested. Some people are paying attention to other stuff. Some are disbelieving, some are supporting, some haven't made up their minds, and some of them just don't care. Well, that is what it looks like from his side. We all know he became a national holiday. We all know he became the name of streets, the names of many streets in many big cities. We all know that he has become a legend, that he won the Nobel Peace Prize. We know that now. That is not how he felt to people then. How he felt to people then was that he was a troublemaker. And that is what they said. And that is what he lived. So, the man on the left is James Forman Sr. James Forman was a younger contemporary of Dr. King, a man who was radical in many ways, and who also happens to be the father of James Forman Jr., the Yale law professor who wrote a rather important book called Locking Up Our Own that won the Pulitzer Prize. But this is a picture of people who are working with James Forman Sr., and they're trying to figure out what to do next. You might notice they look a little tired. They look a little concerned. They're not in the most beautiful surroundings, wearing overalls. This is part of their anti-poverty campaign. And there's King. To my right, his left, I believe, is Ralph Abernathy, one of his close contemporaries. To King's right, James Forman Sr., someone who's not actually thinking and strategizing in exactly the same way, but is trying to collaborate with him. Look at the intensity on King's face. There are obviously big decisions being made, and they might be the wrong ones, and the outcome might be bad, because that's what it's like to be on the inside. That is John Lewis in the middle. That is Forman Sr. with his finger up in the air, dealing with media early in their careers, not necessarily expert yet. And you can see that the media, obviously of a different era, is also a different demographic. And they're trying to negotiate all of that. Look at their foreheads. Look at how intense they are. Do they look comfortable? Do they look easy? Does this look like a postage stamp? Or does it look like people in struggle? The gentleman in the Elmer Fudd hat, who is rubbing his feet and has removed his boots, is Martin Luther King. You'll notice he's not wearing the Nobel Prize tuxedo at the moment. Next to him, I believe, is Ralph Abernathy. They've been marching for a long time. The weather is cold. The clothing is not glorious. But marches were a standard part of nonviolent theory. It was a Gandhian tactic taken from Mahatma Gandhi. And the whole notion was to build suspense over a period of time so that the public would follow what you were doing, So they would see you working towards a destination, towards a goal. I guess a different way to put it was being in a lot of news cycles, but that is what they did. And it meant you did a lot of walking, and it meant your feet hurt. Sometimes your feet hurt a lot. Like that. That's not the prettiest picture, so we'll keep moving. Or sometimes you felt like that, because that's what it's like to be on the inside of trying to bring change when not everybody's ready for the change you're trying to bring. And then there are the people who do not appreciate your efforts. This is a photograph of some people at a rather famous lunch counter. I won't get into all the history, but I'm sure many of you know it. This was a segregated lunch counter. This was a target where a lot of people who were fighting for black civil rights determined that they were going to change the notion that only white people could sit at the counter. If you look at the faces, they don't look incredibly inviting and welcoming just yet. But how did they get from there? How did they get from this wall of opposition to a better place? I'm now going to show you an image that's actually quite shocking. And I'm not doing it to be shocking, but there is an important explanation behind it. So please, when you look at it, even though it's going to impress you a certain way, please listen for why I'm going to show you this image. This is practice. This woman, you might look at this and assume this is domestic violence. This woman and this man are practicing for how they are going to respond to violence. For example, for being slapped while you're sitting at a lunch counter, or pulled off the stool, or have sugar poured in your hair, or be kicked when you're on the ground. She is voluntarily being slapped by a man who's about to be slapped himself in a minute. And they're doing it so that when they come up against resistance, they act with dignity, they make things better, not worse, and they stick to the plan that is necessary to bring change. All right, that's just the image we want up there. May I have a little assistance from either Mr. Slaughter or Mr. Davis? I guess this image broke it. Please bear with us one moment. Can you advance them one by one if I ask you? Next one, please. All right. Well, we're working on it. The point that I'm trying to make, perhaps slower than I should, or more slowly than I should, is that there is a tremendous difference between reading about the civil rights movement in the 1960s in the New York Times, or watching Walter Cronkite, or observing it from afar and being in it. And when you are in it, it is a grind. It is a slog. It is a combination of pure excitement, resistance, suffering, pain in different forms, incredibly hard work. And that is what all of you are about to do. The successes that this office has had are considerable. The successes that a social justice movement to reform criminal justice has had nationally are considerable. And it's not just a question of having gone from a country where there used to be no reform prosecutors to going to a country that a couple years ago had 10% of the population living in a reform jurisdiction, and now it's 20%. A couple years later, it's 20% living in a progressive or reform jurisdiction. It's not just that. because that does mean that right now about 70 million Americans have chosen an elected chief prosecutor who is pursuing reform. And it also means that those being large jurisdictions, more than 20% of all criminal cases in the state system are being handled in a way that is oriented towards reform, towards more integrity in the system, towards more proportionate sentencing, towards less racist sentencing, towards modern enforcement that relies on science, towards studying to see whether more time is a good idea, more forensics are a good idea, to see how to do it right and to do it with integrity. It's not just that it has spread in that fashion. If we look at Philadelphia, what we find in Philadelphia is that there has been tremendous progress. This country went to a level of 500% increase in incarceration over a few decades and became the most incarcerated country in the world. Pennsylvania increased 750%. Philadelphia became the most incarcerated of the 10 largest cities in the United States, even though it has memorials to freedom and national parks dedicated to the Constitution and to freedom and to the Liberty Bell. That's what it became. This office reduced, with the help of the judiciary, of course, reduced the number of years of incarceration coming out of the Philadelphia courts in the first 2 years before the pandemic messed everything up, reduced it in half. This office also worked with our partners, our stakeholders, the judiciary, to reduce supervision, mass supervision, meaning excessive probation and parole, which we had at a level that was 25 times higher than New York, by about 2/3. And this office reduced the number of juveniles who were in snake pit placements, and now hopefully will be in much better placements, by 80%, and we did it in 2 years. That is what happened. I could talk more about all those details, but I want you to understand that the way you get here, the way you get to this photograph, where you have a couple of reluctant waitresses sitting on the other side, not really wanting to serve these customers and smoking a cigarette, is that you had to go through that training. You had to take that resistance. You had to make it through those slaps, and you had to keep pushing to get there. You had to do what this girl is doing, walking in for the first day of an integrated school. Look at the people around her, these supposed grown-ups. Look at what she had to put up with. And look at the doubt that existed then. We look back at this as an artifact, as a disturbing image. That is not how it felt to her on that day, and that is not how society reacted at the time. But she pushed through. That is a tired man. I guess you can see that. It's a tired man, and he's not wearing his tuxedo. And that was the reality of his grind and his effort. That's him at a church late at night. He has overalls on. He's part of the anti-poverty efforts that were going on, and you can just tell the level of exhaustion. Well, some of you are going to be exhausted. It's going to be long days. It's going to be hard work. You signed up for it. And sometimes, no matter how serene someone like Dr. King may have seemed to you, sometimes you got pushed from behind, whether it was with sticks or hands or words. Sometimes you do get upset. Sometimes it does hurt. Sometimes it's a rough day. But you just keep pushing through. All right. Oops, sorry. Yep, there you go. There's the serene expression again. He was only arrested about 20 times. For what exactly? But he kept going. Rosa Parks being fingerprinted. And the Freedom Riders. For those of you who do not know, there were a lot of people, mostly college students, young people, some graduate students who went to the South to try to make the vote available to people who had been excluded from the vote for generations. They were called Freedom Riders. They rode buses, or tried to, sang songs. You'll notice there's National Guard visible out the window. Well, they were there because they had to be there, because if they weren't there, what happened to those nice college students at that bus station could get pretty ugly. And then they went a little further down the road. Oops. And that's what they got. So they are alive, and they're on the berm of the road, and the bus is on fire, because that was the sacrifice and the risk they had to take. They had no choice if they wanted to get to a better place. Fortunately, and this is my last slide, they had lawyers. That lawyer in the middle is Thurgood Marshall, who many of you will know was not only a justice of the United States Supreme Court, he was the first black justice on the United States Supreme Court, but he was also arguably the most successful lawyer of his century. He had been in front of the United States Supreme Court over 30 times. As a young man, he won almost all of his cases, which I know most of you are hoping to do, but that's quite a track record. Fortunately, those people struggling on the inside of that movement had lawyers, and that's what you are. And you are here to be sworn in because you play such an essential role in this effort for change. All right. It is my delight at this time to introduce members of the judiciary who have some wonderful things to say. After Judge McKee has completed his remarks, which I look forward to every year, I will read out your names alphabetically. And at that time, please rise one by one. The whole world can see your face on the screen, so you don't have to look backwards to your folks. And once you are all standing, the Honorable Carolyn Engeltevin, who has worn every hat that you can wear in criminal justice, and by that I mean homicide prosecutor, first woman public defender, judge on the Court of Common Pleas doing many cases, including homicide cases, international human rights judge, and now first assistant at the DA's office, will administer your oath. And after that, we'll have 2 more words about where to go for the reception. Thank you so much for your attention.
All right, if you're following the program, I am not Judge Fox. I am Judge Lizette Sheridan-Harris, the administrative judge of the Trial Division. First, good afternoon, and on behalf of the Trial Division, welcome and congratulations on becoming our newest criminal justice partners. As the administrative judge of the Trial Division of the First Judicial District's Court of Common Pleas, it encompasses the commerce, civil, and criminal sections of the court. So at some point in your career, you'll be before staff and judges who are oversee and are part of either of the criminal section team, the pretrial services, adult probation and parole, criminal listings, courtroom operations, and the Office of Judicial Records. You will have contact with one or many more of staff and judges from that section. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon and to celebrate your accomplishments, becoming assistant district attorneys. Whether you're recently admitted to the bar or are embarking on a new path in your legal career, you should feel proud and honored to serve the citizens of Philadelphia, especially during these unprecedented times. To the families who are here to witness this ceremony, I know how proud you are, and your continued support will be just as meaningful as they navigate this next step. I do want to impress upon each of you here the tremendous responsibility that comes with your new role. As a judge, I've had the opportunity to observe and interact with many attorneys in the courtroom, both good and bad. And what I can tell you is that your greatest responsibility to the community and your clients is to remain ethical and candid. I urge you to remember that the attorneys with whom you interact, both in and out of court, are your colleagues, and the code of civility should guide your actions. Treat each other with respect and professionalism. I know that at times it will be challenging, especially as you become more and more passionate about and committed to your work. However, it's taken you years to reach this point, It only takes a few minutes to harm your reputation, and that will stay with you throughout your career. Finally, I encourage you to treat each of your cases as if it is your only case, because for the victims, their families, the witnesses, and those accused of crimes, it is the only case that matters to them. This requires you to be truthful, diligent, fair, kind, courteous, and last but certainly not least, prepared. These attributes will make you an effective attorney who people can trust. Again, you should all feel honored and impressed with yourselves today. I know your families do. Now embark on this new journey with this awesome responsibility to keep our communities safe while treating the people with fairness and respect. You were chosen to make a difference, and you will. Congratulations.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Judge Lucretia Clemens, and I'm the supervising judge of the Criminal Trial Division. Congratulations and welcome to the District Attorney's Office. It is my distinct honor to be here with you and to welcome you as you begin your journey as the City of Philadelphia's newest Assistant District Attorneys. You are stepping into a role of the utmost importance in this community during a crucial time. If you remember nothing else that I say today, remember this. The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. A quote uttered by Dick the Butcher in Shakespeare's Henry VI is a compliment to lawyers and judges who instill justice in our society. What you will do as an assistant district attorney will have great impact on the lives of the citizens and this community at large. As such, your role comes with a great deal of responsibility. And I promise you that Judge Sheridan Harris and I did not coordinate this responsibility thing. Like most of you, I learned about responsibility from my family. For me, especially my grandmother. My grandparents had 13 children, and I am the oldest of 26 grandchildren. So basically, I've been responsible for someone else my entire life. Growing up during the Depression in the Deep South, my grandmother only had the opportunity to get an 8th grade education, but she was a wise woman. So I tell you today that everything you need to know about succeeding in this profession at the district attorney's office, I learned at my grandmother's kitchen table. Number one, a thing worth doing is worth doing well. Learning the law is difficult, but learning to practice is another issue. Work hard, read, ask questions, and keep your zest for learning. Remember that law school only prepares you to think like a lawyer. It rarely prepares one to practice law. It's called the practice of law because you actually have to practice it to do it. 2, like yourself best. Believe in your skills and abilities. Don't let anyone make you feel inadequate. Despite what others may project, no one who just graduated from law school has a clue what's going on. More than 20 years ago, I walked into a courtroom feeling clueless like a fish out of water. That feeling will go away, trust me. Until it does, fake it until you make it. 3, if you do what you love, you will never work a day in your life. Figure out what drew you to the practice of law. Make sure that your work reminds you of that thing daily. Your job is to do justice, not win convictions. Let me close by saying that you now stand in the breach between justice and lawlessness, right and wrong, peace and war. It is lawyers and judges who instill justice in our society. Dick the Butcher knew that. That's why he wanted to start his attempt to become king by killing all the lawyers. He knew, as you do, that without lawyers, there can be no justice. As you were sworn in today, take a moment to appreciate the significance of your role. From this moment forward, your lives will change, and you will change lives. Congratulations, and welcome to the District Attorney's Class of 2022. I look forward to seeing you all in the courtroom.
Thank you, Judge. Excuse me. I'm Ted McKee. I'm a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. I was appointed by President Clinton in 1994 to that position, but before that, I served for a little over 10 years, actually, as a judge, trial judge in the Court of Common Pleas here in this very building. It was before we had the fancy building across the street. I don't know the name of it.
It's not fancy anymore.
Oh, is that fancy? Okay. Time will do that to you.
The Stout Center.
And as Judge Clemens said, in terms of her remarks, it might sound like we coordinated our remarks. We did not. But some of what I'm going to say, you have heard reference by Judges Sheridan Harris and Judge Clemens, because I think we all see things pretty much the same, and there's a reason for that, because there's some validity and truth in it. I want to start out by thanking District Attorney Kessler for inviting me here again today. I was really transfixed again by his remarks, and as I listened to him speak, I was reminded, as I am many years when I come here, of the effort that is afoot to prevent teaching students anything that will embarrass the kiddies in the classroom. And I thought to myself, well, if that's the path we're embarking upon, none of that history, which is so incredibly vital to our history, to American history, not just Black history that we'll celebrate in a few months, none of that history would be taught. Yet that history is fundamentally important because it's a fundamental part of the United States. It's who this country is, it's what this country is, and it's what this country needs to keep in mind if we're to move forward. I have read, although I've not experienced it firsthand, that if you walk through any major city in Germany, you can not walk for more than a couple of blocks without seeing some reference to the Holocaust. The reason that's done is not obviously to honor the Holocaust and the atrocities that were perpetuated during the Holocaust. It's just the opposite. It's to remind people of what can happen if we don't remain eternally vigilant for the need we have to respect the rights of others and respect others as human beings. And if we move into a situation where we don't teach those kinds of things, we don't teach the kind of history you've seen today, don't teach about the Holocaust because it might embarrass children, we really run the risk of starting out on the path that might lead us to that very same destination. There's some truth to the old adage that history can repeat itself, and it will repeat itself if we are blind to its teachings. Judge Clemens mentioned the zeal for learning. And before I start my formal remarks to you, I'm reminded of something, and I can't remember who said it. It may have been Einstein, but he said, whoever it was, said, we only begin to grow old when we lose our desire to learn. And the older I get, the more I realize how true it is. Don't ever stop wanting to learn. Read. Every chance you get, read. You've heard reference here not only to our history, you've heard reference to Shakespeare. I cannot begin to tell you how important lessons you can glean from Shakespeare. He wrote an incredible play, kind of a short story, about a race, which shows the artificial construct of race. It's called Pudd'nhead Wilson. If you get a chance to read it, he was so far ahead of his time. Actually, that was Mark Twain. I'm getting ahead of myself. Mark Twain, Shakespeare did it with Othello, the same kind of thing, where he spoke about the artificial construct of a race and how it can be so insidious and destructive. Mark Twain did it with Pudd'nhead Wilson. So all that is to say, read every chance you get, and don't lose your desire to learn. We can't help growing older. That's what we do every day. But we can help growing old. And you can push back against growing old by reading. It really is a privilege and an honor to be able to address you here today. You're about to embark upon what may be the most exciting and rewarding phase of your career, and I really mean that. The job which you have earned is so incredibly exciting and important. I was at a law firm right out of law school with some senior partners who hadn't think had ever tried a case, everything settled. And we had, in fact, a running joke in the firm about one very senior partner. And we would quip, and it wasn't just a joke, it was partly true from what I could tell, that the fastest way to settle a trial or to settle a case with him, if you're the judge, is to tell him the next day he's going to pick a jury. Because he'd never tried a case, was afraid to try cases, and he would settle. All that is to say that not many lawyers have the opportunity to try cases. You're going to be doing that, many of you, on a daily basis, and you will learn a great deal from that. And I say that even though most of you are relatively new attorneys, this is the most exciting and rewarding phase of your career. You're going to have immense power, and some of this has already been referenced. You're going to have the power to help improve the communities in Philadelphia. You've already heard reference to a community of Kensington, and if you're not from Philadelphia, I would advise you cautiously, if you get a chance, just drive through Kensington. I did it about a month or so ago, scared the heebie-jeebies out of me. You can't believe you're in the United States of America if you take a ride down Kensington Avenue. There are people laying in the streets, prostrate, homeless, but the homelessness is not the worst part of it. It's the way they look and the condition of their homelessness. I was told, and I have not confirmed this, I was told there's a YouTube channel where someone has posted a camera at one of the main streets in Kensington. You can go on and watch in real time the happenings on a street in Kensington. I've not tried it, as I said, but the person told me if you Google YouTube Kensington, Philadelphia, you should be able to find it. And it's a very, very depressing eye-opening. But you're going to have the power to improve the quality of life for people in many communities, including Kensington. You're also going to have the power to destroy lives in those communities. You have been entrusted with an awesome responsibility, and you need to decide now how you are going to handle yourself and the kind of an attorney that you want to be. By way of, as an aside, many years ago I had a law clerk who clerked with me for a year and then went on to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And after he'd been an assistant U.S. attorney, he called me and said, "Judge, I need to come over and speak to you." And I could hear something in his voice, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I really don't think I belong here. I don't think I can do the job." And I said to him, "You know, I was an assistant U.S. attorney for 3 years, so I know what the job entitles. I've seen your work. You worked with me for a year in a very competitive appellate atmosphere. I know you can do the legal work. What's going on?" And he began to tell me his concern, and I said, "Okay," well, his name was Larry. "Larry, we need to talk." So we went out and we had dinner that evening. And as we sat there and talked, he told me of an experience he'd had that day where he just won his first trial. And the result of him winning the first trial was the defendant turned around, put his hands behind his back, was handcuffed and led out of the courtroom by the marshals. He said to me, "You know, Judge, but for a few circumstances in my career, that could have been me." Larry had actually been homeless for about 2 years while I was in law school. And I knew that when he applied it to me. Despite that, he did incredibly well in law school. Somehow, he was able to persevere through all that. So I asked him, what was it about that bothered him so much? And he said, "You know, Judge, I'm taking away the liberty of people, and it could be turned around. I mean, it may well be that the guy who I'm depriving of his liberty, maybe, but for a few things, he could have been in my shoes, and I could be the one being taken through those doors and being led to prison." And I told him, "Larry, your head is exactly where it needs to be to do the job that you're doing. If you stop having those kinds of feelings when you deprive somebody of their freedom, that's when you need to call me, and we'll talk, and I'll see if I can call somebody at one of the firms in town and maybe help you redirect your career." But that's exactly the mindset you should have as a prosecutor. Do not take it for granted. Don't lose sight of the awfulness of the awesomeness of your power. Your job is an incredibly difficult one. You will see the underbelly of society and have regular, perhaps daily contact with segments of the community that are very unpleasant. You are going to have experiences that can impact you in terms of who you are, the way you view society, and the way you view others. Trying to remain objective and fair and respectful when you are constantly exposed to mindless violence and victimization of innocent people can change how you see the community. It can change how you see yourselves and your colleagues. For 10 of the years that I served as a judge on the Court of Common Pleas, I did nothing but homicide trials. I think Judge Timmon may have done it for longer than I did. At the time, both of my daughters were very young. And I don't mind telling you that it changed in a very real way the way I looked at things. It took an emotional toll on me, just as your jobs will take an emotional toll on you, can take an emotional toll on you. And of course, I realize that you will not be doing homicide trials for quite some time, but the same pollution of spirit can happen if you allow yourselves to succumb to it. Although you will not be faced with emotions surrounding homicides, as I said, you're going to be faced with some very emotional and unpleasant circumstances, perhaps even on a daily basis. You will experience a part of society that you may well never have experienced before. You will often interact on a regular and personal basis with people who are about as far away from the concept of social privilege as you can possibly imagine. Whether it be the victims of crime or the perpetrators of crime, it is absolutely crucial to your professional careers and to your personal development in terms of who you are that you not lose sight of the humanity and dignity of the people you come into contact with and with whom and who are involved in the criminal justice system. Almost all of the defendants whom you will incarcerate will one day be released back into society. If defendants leave the system more damaged, more dehumanized, and devalued than they were when they went in, you have not made the streets of Philadelphia any safer. In fact, they will be more dangerous. Our communities will only be safer when people who have paid their debt to society return to their communities with as much of their self-respect and dignity as possible, given the circumstances of their incarceration. I want to share with you, the hope that it helps you understand the impact you will have not just on victims and their families, but also on the compassion you need to show them, as well as the impact you can have on them as you prosecute those persons involved in the criminal justice system and deprive them of their liberty. You can forcefully prosecute without demeaning the people you're prosecuting. This is not about good guys and bad guys. Judge Clemens alluded to this. And it is certainly not about winning at all costs, as she said. That approach will not make the streets any safer and may, in fact, make them less safe. Carried to a logical extreme, that approach, good guys versus bad guys, winning at all costs, leads to the kind of injustices that results in the wrong persons going to prison when the actual perpetrator remains free on the streets to victimize others and commit other crimes. With that background in mind, I also want to impress upon you that one of your most important things that you can do to improve the criminal justice system requires not a law degree, not knowledge of the criminal law or courtroom procedure. It only requires that you begin to get to know yourself, and that is a lot harder than it might seem at first glance. I say only get to know yourself, but doing that is not an easy task. It is as difficult many times as it is unpleasant. Although it is critically important that you treat everyone involved in the system with dignity and respect, you cannot do that unless you first examine your own motivations and emotions and get to know yourself. And why do I say that? It is no secret that the criminal justice system is far from perfect and that those caught up in it are disproportionately Black, Latino, and poor. Many years ago, I think I'd only been on the bench for a couple of years, I was still in a shoebox of a courtroom called Room 263, which Judge Clemens may remember, which was an embarrassment to the system. Whenever any legislator wanted to argue, whenever any court administrator wanted to argue to the legislature that we needed more money for the courts, they'd bring them to my courtroom. It was horrendous. I think it's now probably being used as a very substandard restroom. I was asked if I would allow a court reporter a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer to sit with me in my courtroom for 2 weeks. And the understanding was he'd sit not only in the courtroom during the trial process, but I'd take him into the robing room, answer any questions that I could answer about the proceedings that he had just witnessed, and invite the prosecutor and the defense attorney back to join in that discussion. At the time, all of my trials were waiver trials. They were tried to me with no jury, as the majority of trials in Philadelphia, I'm sure, still are. So the reporter was getting an inside view into the jury, in a sense, by doing this. The reporter went on to become very famous. Buzz Bissinger wrote Friday Night Lights and wrote a book called Tell of the City, became a very prominent novelist and is a very prominent reporter. We struck up quite a relationship, a very close relationship. After about a week and a half, he asked me, as we're sitting in the robing room, Judge, do you mind if I ask you a question? And, you know, that's always a loaded question. Do I mind if I ask you a question? No, I told him I didn't mind. And he said, I can't help but notice, I've been here for a week and a half now, I've probably seen 40 or 50 criminal proceedings. I have yet to see a white defendant. Why is it that everybody brought into your courtroom is either black or Latino? And I said to him, well, it's not just my courtroom. If you go in any courtroom in the system, you'll find exactly the same thing. It's not like they're singling out me, the black judge, for all the black defendants. That's who's caught up in the criminal justice system. And I told him, I submit there's a reason for that. The conditions of poverty breed a certain kind of environment, they breed a certain kind of deprivation and a certain kind of mentality that is a very, very fertile breeding ground for crimes and for persons who would commit crimes. And that's basically what you're saying. What you're saying is the class and caste divisions we have within the society, and the result of that is the folks being brought into my courtroom. But it is also no secret that the criminal justice system itself, the system itself, not just those within it, is not immune from the pernicious poison of racism and bias. The studies on this are voluminous, and it requires no leap of faith to accept their conclusions. However, it is much harder to accept the fact that each of us, and I include myself in that when I say us, each of us are exposed to social messages that poison our minds and infect us with subliminal bias that can impact how we see ourselves and how we see others and how we treat others. Each of us is infected with the unavoidable bias that we are taught from the time we first become aware of our surroundings. The images we see from the mass media, the conclusions we draw from observing the impact of the disparate distribution of privilege in society, these all bombard us with subtle messages that cause us to prejudge people who are less fortunate and whose appearance is different than ours. There's a wonderful and very instructive song from a Broadway play which you may have heard of, hopefully seen, called Avenue Q. And it is incredibly powerful, and it's often missed because it's developed and communicated in the context of a play which is puppetry. But the lyrics are as follows. Everyone's a little bit racist sometimes. This does not mean we go around committing hate crimes, but look around and you will find no one's really colorblind. It's a basic fact we all should face. Everyone makes judgments based on race. That is so poignant and so very, very true. And you must guard yourself against letting your daily interaction with people in less fortunate communities color your view of who lives there and make value judgments about them. If you are not careful, you can easily develop a very jaundiced view of the people you will interact with that can affect how you treat them. It is particularly important to be aware of this dynamic when you are picking juries. In this day and age, a juror will rarely admit or exhibit overt bias towards someone of a different race or ethnicity. You can do a great deal to increase the likelihood of fairness in the criminal justice system by doing what you can to be sure that any juries that you help select are comprised not of people who are free from bias. That is not a realistic objective. But it is realistic to select jurors who will try not to let any bias they may be harboring, whether they're aware of it or not, affect their deliberations and their verdict. Of course, the vast majority of your trials will be waiver trials, as I mentioned earlier, at the very beginning at least. It's even more important that you treat those defendants and those witnesses and those victims with courtesy. I cannot overemphasize that your job is not to win, but to fairly present the evidence to a fact finder, and to do that in a way that minimizes the possibility that the fact finder will reach a decision based on something other than the evidence which you are fairly presenting. Perhaps I can best summarize this by quoting from something which you may have heard. It's a statement by Justice Sutherland in a 1935 Supreme Court decision called Berger versus the United States. It's a quote that is often referenced, but it's worth repeating nevertheless. Writing for the court, Justice Sutherland said, and forgive the masculine pronouns that he used, but it was written in 1935, and I'm giving you a direct quote. He said, the prosecutor is the representative not of an ordinary party to a controversy, but of a sovereignty whose obligation to govern impartially as compelling as its obligation to govern at all, and whose interest, therefore, in a criminal prosecution is not that it shall win a case, but that justice shall be done. As such, He is in a peculiar and very definite sense the servant of the law, the twofold aim of which is that guilt shall not escape nor innocence suffer. He may prosecute with earnestness and vigor, indeed he should do so, but while he may strike hard blows, he is not at liberty to strike foul ones. It is as much his duty to refrain from improper methods calculated to produce a wrongful conviction as it is to use every legitimate means to bring about a just one. Years ago, one of my very first trials in the federal system was tried before someone whom I think everybody knew him, loved and revered the man, Lou Pollack. He was, before going on the bench, he was dean of the Yale Law School, then he was dean of the Penn Law School. Jimmy Carter, President Carter appointed him to the district court. And many people believe that had the Democrats won that election, had Carter been reelected, that Judge Pollack would have gone on to the Supreme Court and he would have clearly belonged there. He told me in closing to the jury, instructing the jury, not closing to it, at the end of my summation and the defense attorney's summation, before sending the jury out to deliberate and informing them of the law and the instructions, he looked at them and said, during your deliberations, do not worry about whether or not the government wins or loses. The government wins whenever justice is done. And as a young prosecutor, I thought he had just taken a bat and hit me between the eyes. But the more I reflected upon that, I realized that was exactly right. And I actually began adopting that in my closing arguments as a prosecutor, much to one of my supervisors' chagrin. But it was an important message to have the jury bear in mind as they deliberated. The job you have been selected to do is one of the most important in the city of Philadelphia. Each of you has a very real opportunity to make a difference, and I'm confident, and I'm sure that T.A. Krasner and my colleagues on the bench are also confident that you will make a difference. I wish you the very best as you embark upon this new and exciting career, and I again want to thank District Attorney Krasner for inviting me to be part of this very, very special event and day in your lives. Thank you.
And now, without further ado, or further something, we will read out the names of our new attorneys in the Philadelphia DA's office alphabetically. Please rise when I do so and remain standing. And after we are all standing, then it will be the opportunity for Judge Temin to swear you all in. If I mess up your name, let me know. I don't need any robots working for me. I want people who are going to let me know. Burhan Yusuf Abdi. I'm not going to read all these bios, but they are amazing. And if you are sitting out there and are interested, please take a look at these bios. We have a magnificent group of people from amazing schools from different parts of the country with fascinating backgrounds. Diane M. Adamchak. Ali Amado. Bruce Ballard. Alex Bowerman. Clifton Ogburn Braxton. Samuel Butler. Nikisha Samantha Cox. Tonisha Cox. All right. Come on now. There we go. Jillian Dagress. David DeFelice. Peter Della Porta. Matthew DeSafi. Maria A. DeGeorge. Carson Easterling. Katie Ernst. Nathan Paul Ezzo. Megan Farley. Ben Gibson. Kelsey Jamero. Uh-oh. Hold on now. Did something happen?
You missed a few.
All right, bear with me, I'm sorry. Teleported, Dowdy. I might have turned 2 pages. My apologies. All right. Jonathan Fedor.
Yeah.
Okay. Jonathan Fedors, Ryan Ferguson, Eric Fields. Oh, no. Okay, sorry about that. Alexandra Freeman. Ben Gibson. Kelsey Jamero. H. Teresa Glinsky. Corey Grable. Nicholas Giuliano. Courtney Young. Uh-oh. I'm sorry. Emily Halmy. Courtney Young. Sarah Patricia Jones. Sabrina Kaplan. Emma Kenyon. Katarina Crone. Julia Lucas. Kara Massey. Mackenzie McGeehan. Ya McNeil. Haley Mayer. Summer Menifee. Stephanie Ojeda. Shane Ordway. Jesse Plaxa. Mariah Marie Rivera. Blair Rolfing. David Russell. Anthony Salzetta. Is Mr. Sandman here or no? No, okay. There we go. Catherine Schultz. Harry Siegel. Melissa Showett. Jessica Stockelrote. Brittany Jasmine Stokes. Teresa Topping. Helena Von Naj. Brianna G. Wakefield. Miranda Jo. And last but not least, Daniel Zmistowski. Judge Temin, I present you with the DAO class of 2022.
DAO class of 2022, raise your right hands, please, and repeat after me. I, say your name. Do solemnly declare. That I will preserve, protect, and defend. The Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And that I will perform. The duties of Assistant District Attorney. With fidelity. Congratulations, you may be seated.
For one more time, but not the last time, may we have some gratitude for your friends and family who got you here. I hope the members of the judiciary will accept my gratitude for their insightful comments and for their being willing to be here. To start you on the road, I'm sure you will find that they and their colleagues will be mentoring you in different ways as you move forward in your careers. And I hope that all of you will join us. There is a reception immediately following. It is not far from here. You essentially take a right turn out the front door, take another right turn at the corner, get on the elevator, go down to the first floor, go outside, and follow the human trail, which will be walking probably only about 50 yards crossing a street. There is a building immediately across from City Hall and also immediately across from the coffee shop La Colombe. It's called the Widener Building. It is at 30 South 15th Street. Please get on the elevator, go up to the 15th floor. There will be these esteemed lawyers, food, perhaps some beverages, some photographs, and the opportunity to discuss their fascinating future work and past work. So we hope that you will all join us, and thank you very much for attending.